mentioned, I find a sort of personal affinity with the dome and what it means, because not only of the history of it, but because it reminds me of my brother.
Thank you for your cooperation. Where are you from?
I'm Anna and I'm from London.
Okay. And then what do you do in your country?
Well, at the moment I'm travelling, but normally I work in something called public affairs, which means that I help businesses to engage with government.
Cool. How long have you already stayed in Japan?
I only arrived in Japan 2 nights ago. I arrived in Tokyo and then flew straight here to Hiroshima.
Only 2 days.
Yes.
How was Japan so far?
Beautiful. Everything here is like a work of art, and although I still feel like I'm settling in, I'm really starting to enjoy myself.
Okay. And then, how long have you stayed in Hiroshima?
2 nights.
2 nights.
And then I leave tomorrow, unfortunately.
Okay. And then, how is the impression about Hiroshima?
I think one thing that amazes me about the city, thinking about its history, is how almost everything here has been built within the last 70 years, with obviously very few exceptions. So that really leaves an impression on me as I walk around the city. And then the second thing, but obviously this is just being new in Japan, everything I want to eat. Everywhere there are beautiful little restaurants and coffee shops, and I have to stop myself from eating constantly.
What made you decide to come to Hiroshima?
My brother was in Japan 10 years ago, and he really found the city moving and interesting. In fact, he has a large tattoo of the peace dome on his arm from his time here. And I wanted to come down to the south of the country, so it was an obvious starting point for my stay in Japan.
Did you go to Peace Museum?
Yes, I visited yesterday.
Okay. What did you feel in there?
I thought that it was interesting how the museum focused primarily on the experiences of the people both on the day and after the attack. I thought that was incredibly powerful and moving, and the artwork that was produced by some of those people I found really haunting. As a student of politics, I'm quite interested in the political history, but actually I thought that it was right that that played a secondary role to what is really a human tragedy.
Which part was the most impressive part in the museum?
There were a couple of things that made an impression on me. Actually, first of all, when you very first come into the museum, the large pictures along the wall of Hiroshima before the bombing and then after the bombing were so desolate and really made the hairs on my skin stand on end to see that total devastation. And then I think I was really moved when you start to get into some of the individual stories and some of the people who died either on that day or shortly afterwards, and the families that they left behind and the stories that they left behind. So yeah, that very visual impact of what happened on August the 6th, but then of course coupled with the human story, I think were the lasting impressions for me.
And then also, did you go to the, did you see the atomic bomb dome?
Yes.
And then how did you feel when you saw this one?
It reminds me a lot of something called the Gedächtniskirche in Berlin in Germany, which is where you take a monument like that, a building like that that has been impacted by a bomb or war, and actually preserve it as it is, as a living memory. I find that quite an honourable thing to do. And as I mentioned, I find a sort of personal affinity with the dome and what it means, because not only of the history of it, but because it reminds me of my brother. So as I stood there on the river watching the dome, I was contemplating not just the horror of the atomic bomb, but also reflecting on my brother being stood here 10 years ago looking at it.
Did you learn about Hiroshima in your country, like in school?
Yes, a politics student and also somebody interested in history. So I certainly studied it as part of my politics, but we also studied the dropping of the atomic bomb when we were probably about 15, 16, as part of our studies around sort of modern history and the Second World War in particular.
And then has your perspective changed through your experience in Hiroshima?
I think that when you learn about it in school, especially perhaps when you're that age, it's just a date. It's just something that happened what feels like a very long time ago. But now being here and being older and seeing not just the bomb site, but those human stories myself, it makes it feel much more real, much more tragic. I think that sometimes when we're just learning about things in books like that, it's easy to detach yourself from the reality on the ground, but being here and in particular being at the museum, that's not possible.
Do you think, is there anything we can do for peace?
Well, one thing that's made me smile while I've been here is seeing all the hundreds of children that go and visit the museum every day. I think it's really important, not just for those children to learn about their history and what happened here, but I guess my question was, how do we make sure that more people understand that human impact that you see when you're here in person, but perhaps students around the world studying Hiroshima as an abstract notion might not be able to understand. I think it's been really heartwarming as well to see how many of the victims or survivors of the dropping of the bomb have been talking at international conferences. I guess that's a really powerful way, taking those human stories directly to the decision makers who influence whether we have peace or war. And hopefully through projects like yours too.
Finally, do you have any comments or advice for people who have not yet visited Hiroshima?
I think certainly come and spend a whole day just around the Peace Memorial. There is not just the museum, but there's the dome, there's the cenotaph, and each part of that whole island taking a slightly different perspective on the human impact of the dropping of the bomb. Again, I thought it was really powerful to look at the impact on children in particular, not just again on the day, but in terms of some of the health issues that young people had afterwards. And if they can, to hear some of the testimonies here from either the families or the survivors of the families.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.